disability news. MacMillan launches one-to-one virtual BSL support for deaf people who have been impacted by cancer. 1 in 6 Americans who use insulin are reporting that they are rationing their supplies due to mounting costs. Delta's debut for the new wheelchair-accessible aircraft seat. But is this just all smoke and mirrors? And Medi Cinema, offering a unique cinema experience to people who are in hospital. Hello my wonderful friends, and welcome back to another episode of Disability News. If you missed the last episode, then you can catch it here, and I will leave all the other previous episodes linked down below. Also, if after watching this video you want to find out more about the topics I highlight, I'll also leave that information in the description box as well. If you have been enjoying this series, make sure to give me a thumbs up. You can also offer a super thanks and also share this video with a friend. In one of my previous videos, I mentioned how I was raising money for MacMillen, who offer support to people who have been affected by cancer. MacMillen Cancer Support is there to offer support for people who have been impacted by cancer by offering talking therapies, advice, specialist nurses, financial guidance, well-being coaching, and they can even help support employees who have staff affected by cancer. From people I know who have had cancer, they have said that the MacMillan nurses have been an absolute godsend. But imagine being diagnosed with cancer and your first language is BSL, British Sign Language. Imagine that we are in the thick of a pandemic and no one can leave their house. You have to go and attend your hospital appointments and speak to consultants about your treatment and about your diagnosis, but you can't speak the language and you can't have a family member there to interpret for you. Just completely lost. I can't imagine how scary that could be, but that was the case for many people within the deaf community who were diagnosed with cancer during the pandemic. And the pandemic really highlighted the lack of access and support information for the deaf community. And that is when the MacMillan Deaf Cancer Support Project with Self-Help UK came to light. It supplies trained volunteers to give people in the deaf community one-to-one virtual BSL support. It can support emotionally, it can support practically and point you in the right direction to support within your local area. They can also provide medium-level advocacy work in complex cases. Not only can they support deaf people who have been diagnosed with cancer, but they can also help deaf people who are supporting hearing people who have been diagnosed with cancer as well. If you are interested about finding any more information on this, I will leave all of the details in the description box. Did you know that diabetes is the most common chronic disease in the US? But 1 in 6 Americans have been reported to ration their insulin supply due to mounting costs, with some people reporting they are spending up to half their disposable income on a drug that keeps them alive. Now this story is quite close to home, as my sister is a type 1 diabetic and it broke her heart hearing this. Here in the UK with the NHS, thankfully, this is something she never has to worry about. Insulin, which provides essential and ongoing treatment for millions of people living with diabetes, was discovered more than 100 years ago. Though insulin generally costs less than $10 to make, some versions of the drugs have a list price of nearly $200. Research has shown that the average retail price for insulin rose 54% from 2014 to 2019. Additionally, the price of some insulin has grown by 1,000% over the past 20 years, for outpacing inflation. Drug maker Eli Lilly will cap the out-of-pocket costs of its insulin at £35 a month, aligning them with Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which capped insulin at $35 a month for Medicare recipients. And Novo Nordisk announced they would follow suit, making 90% of market compliant. Let's hope there is more of this to come. Last year, 11,389 wheelchairs and scooters were damaged by American Airlines. That is 11,389 wheelchairs and scooters too many, in my opinion. It shouldn't be happening in 2022 and 2023, but it does. And not so long ago, Delta made their debut on their new wheelchair accessible seat. And what do you think? I believe that at the moment this is just for wheelchair users who can roll onto the cabin. They can park up in this nifty little space where the seat cushion pulls out and is stowed underneath. You can then park into the wheelchair space. Your wheelchair is then tethered to the bottom so it won't go anywhere. You have a headrest, you can still have a cocktail table, and you still have access to the middle console. Now, several parties within the disability community were consulted on the design of this new seat, but what do you think? A couple of issues for me here. I'm thinking, how am I going to get to the bathroom? What would happen in an emergency? Evacuation? And what was the other one? And can I recline? Also, these seats look relatively large. Usually on the smaller economy aircrafts, we usually see a 3-3 configuration. We normally see a 2 configuration like this in either business class or premium economy. So will these seats cost more? How many of these seats are going to be on the aircrafts, obviously depending on the size, and who then takes priority? If a non-disabled person has booked this seat, but then a disabled person comes along, what's going to be the protocol there? This design is still a prototype and it hasn't been passed by aviation laws. If it is going to pass, it could take a year, even 18 months. And that's if it does pass the safety procedures. And speaking to a lot of you, you're not quite sure, and I'm not quite sure about this either. What happens to the people who have mobility aids or who use a manual wheelchair? I know that I wouldn't want to fly all the way to Australia sat in this seat. I would be extremely uncomfortable, even more uncomfortable than if I was just sat in a normal seat. And what happens to people like myself with manual wheelchairs who have still got to store their wheelchairs in the hold? They're still going to be damaged and we're still going to have all of that stress and worry. I feel like this is something that they are putting forward to be seen like they are tackling an issue here, but I think the real issue here is the lack of training and awareness, and I'm pretty sure that training their staff and giving them the awareness on the importance of wheelchairs, the importance of the disability and aviation laws, is a lot cheaper than having to refurbish their fleet. Air for All did say that they were going to facilitate a more smoother boarding process for people using these seats, with an aim to significantly reduce damage. But again, is that just for power wheelchair users? I think if I was president of the world, I would say that these seats look fantastic for power wheelchair users. I think with a little bit of design tweaking and a little bit more in-depth look at the situation, these could be fantastic. And I feel that people who use mobility aids or manual wheelchairs also need to have legislations put into place as well. We should be able to roll straight onto the aircraft, transfer into the desired seat we require, and then our aircrafts should be stowed either near us on a seat or in a wheelchair cupboard, like I did when I flew with Qantas. I can't tell you how much stress and worry was just lifted off me when I approached the aircraft door and the flight crew were so accommodating. That's all it takes. It only takes a little bit of awareness, a little bit of education, a little bit of understanding and a cupboard, and I think, you know, we could have cracked it. I know that this subject is extremely heated and an extremely popular one within the disability community, so I'm sure that you guys have got a lot to say about this in the comments, and I would love to open up this discussion. What do you think should be done here to make travelling for disabled people a lot less stressful and a lot easier? Now, the other week, myself and my lovely family went to see The Little Mermaid. Oh my goodness, it was amazing. Call me an old fuddy-duddy, but I had tears of joy. During the movie there was an advert for a Medi Cinema, which I had never seen before, and I really wanted to highlight this service that is available in some of our UK hospitals. Now, Medi Cinema first opened in 1999, and since then it now has 6 Medi Cinemas across hospitals in the UK. They build, install and run state-of-the-art cinemas within the hospitals, offering families and friends of people who are at hospital that immersive cinema experience. They can accommodate wheelchairs, drips, medical supplies and even hospital beds. There are NHS nurses on hand to check that everybody is safe throughout the performance. It really invokes that in-depth cinema immersive experience, and when I saw this it really touched my heart because, as many of you will know, I was in hospital for a prolonged period of time when I was 9, and it was pretty grim and pretty dark, and you know, when you are at a children's hospital, they do their best to try and make it as fun and try and take your mind off things with outings as much as possible. I know that having one of these Medi Cinemas would have been fantastic for myself and my family. It gives you that chance to kind of get away from all of the medical things, all of the medical talk, and gives you something else to focus on for a while. To date, there are only 6 of these cinemas in the UK, but they do hope to double this by 2025. These Medi Cinemas, they don't receive any NHS or government funding. They are an independently funded charity. I'll leave a list of the hospitals that they are at the moment. So I would love to know what you think of all of these stories I have highlighted in this week's episode of Disability News. Don't forget, if you see an interesting story that you think will be good for the next episode of Disability News, you can always contact me by email or on my socials. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, I think you will enjoy this video. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, share it on your socials, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!